The world is betting on your burnout. On Disrupt and Discuss, we are here to break the corruption. Dr. Monique Tarver, PsyD, is stepping in to execute a clinical overhaul on your mental standard. Stop negotiating with the noise and start demanding the clarity. The doctor is here. Dr. Monique Tarver, Disrupt and Discuss.
I will never, ever shrink again to make someone else feel comfortable because my ancestors fought too hard. So I started asking the question, what would my life have been like if I had grown up without guilt, fear, or shame around sex? Which, by the way, is a human, natural, wonderful thing to participate in.
We have another special guest here with us. Today, we have an amazing guest joining us, Dr. Monique L. Tarver.
Woo!
Is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 2 decades, you guys, of experience as both a paraprofessional and licensed clinician. She is the founder of Good Times Ahead Marriage and Family Ministries, where she has been serving couples and families since 2000. So that's what, 26 years. Dr. Tarver is a wellness educator, curriculum designer, ministry of family, and a published author who researched on the sexual health of Black women, has been featured in the Journal of Feminist Family Therapy. She is passionate about culturally responsive, integrative approaches to mental wellness and anti-stigma education. On top of all that, you guys, she's an adjunct professor shaping the next generation of marriage and family therapists, teaching everything from law and ethics to diversity and culture. And when she's not pouring into everyone else, she's spending time with the love of her life for nearly 30 years, Mr. Wonderful, and their 4 adult children. Please, D&D family, help us welcome Dr. Monique L. Tarver.
What? Give me goosebumps.
Oh, so great to be here. You were reading all that, and I'm like, really? Is that me? Yeah,
That's
me.
you.
Yeah.
And for the people who knew me before, I know that I have 3 children that I've birthed. The 4th child is one of love, who chose our family. We chose her, and we're never giving her back. That's my daughter, Love, my oldest son right now, and we love her.
That is beautiful. I love to hear that. Thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation with us with regards to your profession. And we're going to get into a lot of things the D&D family is going to love. I usually like to bring it over to that one over there. The next half.
Okay.
The other way.
Yeah, there you go.
Right there. Right
There you go. There you go.
Casey, take it away, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Tarver. Thank you for coming. Even before we had the doctor in front, you still were the doctor. No, seriously. And what I mean by that, I had the opportunity to have been part of some small groups that Monique and Mr. Wonderful were putting together. They've even come to our house and we had small groups of adults and just talking about different things. And one of the things that Aaron and I had said during that time was when we would discuss things that you would need to discuss before you decided to get married, for example, because we didn't do any marriage counseling. And where I grew up, if you were going to a marriage counselor, that means your marriage was on the rocks. So we were sitting there and just, okay, this is what you would do in marriage counseling. Some of the questions and thoughts that we should have had instead of just being young and dumb and just walking blindly, we're like, damn, we really navigated through some bombs, really. So we were really blessed and glad to hear what you guys had to say, but also, we didn't need it, but damn, it made us think on certain topics that we never thought about, even being married 30 plus years. So again, that has stuck with us, and it's been years since we've all done the small groups, but again, that does still come up in conversations that we have. It didn't fall on deaf ears.
Oh, I love
So
her.
again, thank you for being here and shedding the light. I'm sure I'm going to walk away scratching my head on something else that I should have had a session with before I got married, but it's a little late for that now. I ain't going nowhere.
Never too late to learn, but I hear you on that. That's right. Thank you so much. I'm so
Yes.
glad to hear that you had conversations that caused some thinking. I always say that I'm just here, hopefully, to inspire some thinking. I'm just here to help you think. That's all I'm here to do. And if that happens, then I've done my job.
Well done.
I love that. Let's hop into this. We want to get into the mental health stigma in the Black community. So a lot of Black people in the Black community grew up hearing pray about it, or what happens in the house stays in the house. How do you even begin to break through that when it's been passed down generationally? How do you break through that?
one of the things that I do is we talk about landing on some definitions, right? So what is mental health? A lot of times people think that mental health is the absence of stress, or they look at it as a definition or a destination. They look at the definition of mental health as a destination and not a state and a process and an ongoing way to invest in wellness. And I'm going to talk about the definition for a moment, and then I'll go back to your question about what goes on in the house and praying about it, right? One of the things to think about when you're talking about mental health is that it is a state of being that includes the ability to cope with distress and navigate pressures that may include diagnosable mental health conditions, right? So it is not the absence of distress, not necessarily the absence of a diagnosable mental health condition. It is about the ability to cope with those things in a healthy and balanced way. A lot of that starts with perspective. So when you talk about perspective of the Black community, it's really important to think about not just what that perspective is, how it's repeated, but the history of it, where it comes from. So I'll first start with pray about it. Pray about it has value. I have seen prayer work.
Mm-hmm.
I've also seen therapy work, and I've also seen medication work. It's not so much that one replaces the other, but there is a way that all can exist. And sometimes the answer to prayer is the support that you can get from others in the form of therapy and or medication if that's necessary, right? When we talk about things that stay in our house, we have to think about the historical implications of that. Some things that could leave our house could actually be the matter of life and death in our history. And we could talk all about how that history is continuing to be informed by that philosophy. Some things change and some things we still are struggling with, quite frankly. There are still some things that as an individual, as a Black woman, it's going to be very difficult to have some level of understanding and humility from others outside of the community to understand what that really means for me, right? What that really means to my family. So it's not so much about being closed off, but it is about being wise and discreet. Having discretion, in other words, not discreet where you're secretive, but having discretion. It may not be in my best interest to share everything with everyone. And we also have to have a goal in mind. So when I am speaking about things outside of my house, quote unquote, what is the purpose and what is the goal of that? And is this the place to get that? Does that make sense? I hope I'm answering your question.
Very much.
No, it does. I wanted to go back to the original portion where you said, when I said pray about it, and you said prayer works. I've seen prayer work. I've also seen therapy work. I've also seen medicine work, right? I totally agree. I actually do believe in a balance. I'm not really, this is just my honest opinion. It's not really, I don't look at the medication side more. I'm more of a balance of the therapy and prayer. But my question would be next. So when do you know when you should institute one or the other or all three? What epiphany do you have to have?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's individual for people, right? I will say this, that when it comes to, when you get to a point, and I'm going to speak to this just from the mental health perspective, when there is a diagnosable mental health condition. When we talk about mental health, this is why definitions are so important. So as an individual who started my career, and I am still very much hands-on and very much committed to being able to talk about mental health from a very distinct and educated platform, if that makes sense. So being very specific about what mental health is and what mental health is not. I can appreciate the conversations that are being had about mental health right now. I really can. The more the conversation is had, the less confident we can be that every time we're having the conversation, we're all talking about the same thing. So that's why I start with the definition of what mental health is and what it is not. So when we talk about mental health as a diagnosable condition, we're talking about symptoms that are impacting daily functioning to the extent that there are barriers to being able to function at optimal wellness, right? But it's a continuum. So it could be from mild to severe. But a lot of times, and the reason why I'm saying this is because right now, when I hear people talk about mental health, once they start talking and they start describing things, what they're actually describing is discomfort. It's not that this is a mental health condition. This is that I'm uncomfortable with what's happening. I'm uncomfortable with being responsible for my responses to distress. And I'm also uncomfortable with the idea that coping with distress is in fact my responsibility and not that of another. So I hear this term a lot. I'm protecting my mental health and I'm protecting my peace, right? Have you heard that? Right.
A lot.
Usually what that means is anything that I perceive as being a threat to my peace and my discomfort is something that I am going to avoid, push away, and blame another person for. And none of this is, I believe, is ill-intended, and none of it is a judgment or a condemnation. These are observations that I'm making, right? And it's important, again, to have that conversation about what mental health is and what is stress and what type of stress I'm facing. Is this good stress? The type of stress that motivates me to do my best, study hard for a test, be on time for work, right? Is this neutral stress where it just is what it is? This is part of the human condition, right? Or is it toxic stress? Is it something else that has the potential to create a deeper impact on my life, my well-being, how I think, how I process, how I feel, how I respond to information. And so when you start to see things where there are solutions that are being applied that are not actually moving the problem away, but they're actually contributing to keeping the problem the same, so it's maintaining the problem and or making the problem worse, then that's when I know I might need to pivot and adjust. If I'm praying and it works, keep
Mhm.
doing it. If it's not working, then I need to pivot and adjust. It doesn't mean that I stop praying, but maybe I need to look at what I'm praying about, what I'm praying for, how I'm
Right.
praying, what am I doing after I pray? How am I following up? What am I following through with, right? I hope that makes sense.
No, it actually does. Because I came from that house of, let's pray. Let's pray
Mhm,
about it. Let's pray
mhm.
about it.
That's what
Or I also came from that household, it stays in here. Don't be going out there telling my business. And that went to school, that went to church, that went everybody.
It
Don't
went
you
to
tell
grandma's
what go
house. You don't tell
Yep,
your grandma that
Don't
goes
don't
on
you
in this
say
house.
tell what go on in this
'Cause
house.
I
This
said
ain't
that to
none of
my
their
kids.
business. And growing up with that, being a kid, growing up into that, it can have its own
it absolutely can.
its own scars, or that's what you bring into your household, right? And it took
Absolutely.
a lot for me to take a portion of that out of my household, dealing with things like that. But when you say that, you made total sense. I just wanted to know, and you said something with regards to the symptoms and how those symptoms show up and how those symptoms arrive. And eventually you're looking at from those symptoms, you're walking it back and reversing it to see what the root cause is, right? So why does that symptom show up?
And even in that, and I want to circle back to something else you said, because I want to be clear, especially for people who are listening, that some things in our houses, they need some exposure, right?
I
Like there are
agree. I
just
would
some
agree.
things that are happening, abuse, things like that. They need some exposure. I think what we have to also consider in that are the things that everything has like costs and benefits, right? We have to be able to look at the
Yeah.
benefits and the drawbacks as well. And we take those together, not separately. So we have to understand that an exposure brings with it a lot of other stuff. I hear this a lot of times when I'm talking to social workers who struggle with disclosures that come out of the house that really can impact the house to the extent of disrupting a family where people are taken out of the home. We also have to consider, and I'm not saying that you don't do that legally and ethically. There's some things that we have to do, right? There's some protections that need to be in place, right? But we also have to consider that everything about what we do as a community, everything that a person does, even as an individual, is not wholly negative and it's not wholly positive either.
Right.
There's a lot between what we can just describe in one way. So, yeah, we do have some rules about what we say in the house, and that could be defined from house to house. But to your point, E, yeah, we sometimes we just parent out of habit and or spite. Like I parent because that's what I saw my parents do, or I parent despite what my parents did to prove that
Yep.
they were wrong.
Yep.
So I
Dead
have
on.
a different question. When you had said earlier about mental health, is it hiding something that you really don't want to address? Because I'm just thinking sometimes there's a fine line, meaning if you walk away, whether it be a family member or parent, because you've got grown up and there's certain things that you're not going to deal with anymore. Not necessarily there's a problem, but look, you know what? You're a toxic person. This isn't good for me. I'm walking away. So technically, yes, I'm walking away from something else, which is that individual per se.
Mhm,
But again, I guess I'm looking at the fine line is I'm okay because I walked away.
mhm.
But yes, I don't want to deal with the undercurrent of what makes me feel this way when I'm with that person. Does that make sense?
It does. It
Okay.
absolutely does. And again, I think what we're talking about are, in some sense, swooping generalizations, right?
Yeah.
When I talk about avoidance, and I think that's what you're referring to when I said before that it's about avoidance. I blame other people. I don't want to, okay, that might be a
Right.
separate issue. Then I'm actually dealing with a toxic person. I think the point that I really want to stress here, though, is that we really have to be careful when we're talking about these things. And I'll just say this for me as a clinician, I'm careful about when I'm talking about these
Mhm.
things. I want to know when someone says to me, I have a toxic person in my life, what that means.
Okay.
But sometimes a toxic person in my life means this is someone who holds me accountable to what
Okay.
and that is uncomfortable for me.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what would you say? I'm going to stick here a little
Mhm.
bit because when I say social media, you have people who come on social media. That's why I avoid Facebook a lot
Mhm.
because there's a lot of internet therapists on Facebook and
Well, my
on
social media
Instagram.
game is big, so I appreciate you sharing that.
There's a lot of them on there, and a lot of times they can make statements that are pretty, or they can respond to things in a flat manner. And what I mean by flat, sometimes the answer is not as black and white. Sometimes there's some gray and there's
Absolutely.
nuance, there's some layers. But
Absolutely.
when you profess to be this, you've been given the term of an internet therapists on here, and you have a lot of people following. You have a lot of following now because you said some buzzwords, you've made some sense sometimes. And so now you have a following. So you have people actually looking to you and DMing you and asking you for your opinion, and you have no real, you just have life experience or lived experience. Do you think that, you said it could be both? It can be harmful, but it also can be helpful. I would say it's more harmful in ways because a lot of times we like to, especially in our community, we like to give people who don't necessarily have the credentials. They don't know what they're saying to someone, and someone may be taking what they're saying as Bible, quote unquote Bible, and they really should be talking to someone who has a bit more experience. How do we navigate that as a community?
I think that's a really good question. The reason why I say it can be helpful is it's a great conversation starter. And so hopefully when Google doctors are on the internet and talking about things, there are some disclaimers about sitting with a licensed professional. But we also have to understand, the reason why I say it's good is because we also have to understand that for some individuals, there are barriers, and that there could barriers to sitting with a licensed clinician. And I don't want to get into all of that, but you hear what I'm saying when I say that there are barriers. There are things that may make it difficult to do, but a moment to have a conversation to recognize that you're not alone, and that mental health does exist, and that there is help out there. It's a great conversation starter, hopefully leading someone to be able to sit with someone personally. So hopefully maybe some of these licensed clinicians will offer services pro bono. I don't know. There are people who are going to listen to this podcast today, and they are going to be so upset by perhaps some of the things that I've said. And I'm happy for you all to share my contact information for people to contact me directly, right? For follow-up questions, or you have questions or concerns about anything that was said.
Absolutely.
But to the point, and the reason why it could be helpful, I mentioned conversation starter, right? And pointing people in a direction. But it's really important, I think, first and foremost, for us to acknowledge that your mental health and well-being is the responsibility of the individual first.
Yep.
And so with that said, reputable sources, and I'm not knocking anybody because I don't want the people coming for me. I'm not knocking anybody who practices on the social media, internet webs, as I call it, right? But pointing someone, I think, to a licensed clinician in their area is part of the responsibility, right? Being able to say, okay, do you have medical coverage? Here's some websites where you can view the profiles of licensed clinicians, see if they have a sliding scale, see if they offer services free, see if there is a place that can really back up any services that they render. And so it's really important as a responsible individual to know that anything that you hear from someone about health and well-being is not to replace direct services, right? So I'm not going to listen to a doctor or a legal professional without acknowledging that what I hear might be helpful and it's an entry point, but I don't take it as personal care.
Right.
That's a long-winded way of answering your question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I also want to add the other risk of dealing with these internet therapists. They have no confidentiality, right? So what you say to them, they have not taken an oath to keep what you said to them private. Anything that you DM them, don't get on their bad side. We see it all the time. They're screenshotting your text messages and putting them up,
I didn't know
for
that.
people to, yeah.
I don't follow
by laws and ethics. So let me say that our profession is governed by law and ethics. Anyone that you're sitting with, and I do this, the very first thing that I do is go over disclosure, what you can reasonably expect in therapy with me, what the process looks like, what it entails, what I can do legally and ethically, what I'm not allowed to do legally and ethically, and perhaps even what I am most proficient at. In case you're looking for something different, I can point you in the direction of where you could get that from. So the responsibility piece is both moral, or I should say all three. It's moral, it's legal, and it's ethical. So if you're not getting that covered, then there is a difference between having a therapeutic conversation and engaging in therapy. Psychology is a science. Therapy is an application of that science. If you are not sitting with a scientist, a licensed clinician, in other words, then the services that you are getting are not therapy. They might be counseling. There's a difference. They might be life coaching. That's a difference. But I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. So when you sit with me, you are going to get therapy as an application of the science of psychology.
That brings up a point I had too, because what if there's a person that just clearly just needs to talk, and they're thinking that there's a problem, but then after they sit with you, then you realize, you need to go down the hall, that this isn't what this is. And the reason why I bring it up, because there are a lot of people that are lonely. If I'm paying you, you're going to listen to me. I have a friend of mine that's a nurse, and there's people that come in and they like getting shots. So you have to weed them out, because that's an issue with that person. So I say to you, do you come across every once in a while people, they just literally want to come because they want to talk and have conversation, and it's time out because they just want to be in your presence,
They need a
so to
friend.
speak. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the first. Yes, I do come across people that way. I do not keep people on my schedule who are very clear about the fact that's what they want.
Yeah.
What I can do when that is the case is we find ways to work together so that perhaps that is a therapeutic goal. Maybe
Yeah.
the goal of therapy then becomes to help you in gender spaces and to be a part of great spaces where you can socialize and be friends. Is there a barrier to you having a paid friend? That doesn't have
Yeah.
to be right, because I'm not going to be a paid friend. So I'm very clear. I have very clear clinical boundaries. I don't meet with friends, and I don't meet with clients who become friends. We're not friends. We could be friendly, but we're not friends.
Mhm.
I'm your therapist. Case in point, this is so funny. I had someone recently that was meeting with me for therapy. And so we were talking. I just wanted to check in with you. We always talk about me. I just wanted to see how you were doing. And I thought that was so kind and so wonderful. But we talk about you because you're in therapy. I'm not. This is your space. This is your therapeutic space. And it is not about me in any way.
Yeah.
I have my spaces. It's not when I'm performing as a therapist. And so, yeah, I make that very clear from the beginning. This is not place therapy. Venting is not therapy. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in therapy. I want to be clear about that. It doesn't mean we
Right.
don't talk. I tell people all the time, if it's important to you and it comes up here, it comes up here.
Yeah, within context.
Right?
Sure.
Therapy has goals and you need to graduate.
Funny you should say that about graduating. Because there's times when there's people that, and I'm referring to TV shows, when back in the day when everybody was going to a therapist and they were on the couch and different TV shows, and they're like, oh, I've been in therapy for 15, 20 years. At how long? And I know it's individual. That part I do realize, but how long is too long when it's like, you really need to get out and do this?
Yeah.
You're at that starting line. You just need to go and do it.
I think what you're saying is a really great question that a lot of people have. And I had to laugh when you said we see it on TV. No, they don't. They portray us poorly on TV. I very rarely see a therapist portrayed accurately. Let me just say that. I digress. So again, it's about establishing goals. What is our goal, right? Once we start to see gains toward that goal, and research backs up on this. Once you get a person who is in therapy and they start to accomplish whatever their therapeutic goal is, and then they stay in therapy beyond that, the gains that they had start to decline. So staying in therapy longer than you need it is contraindicated. It does more harm than it does good.
Yeah. It's like a crutch, I would think, but
yes,
I'm not a therapist, so
crutch is a good word, but I will say this, it is about having in place measures that track success. So you have to have a clear goal first and foremost, and then ways to track the success toward that goal. And then once you hit that, you graduate.
We're going to transition to our next question.
What is that, question number 2?
No, but I think we tackled some things that really need to be said, and hopefully people will. That objective for me was to hopefully encourage people, especially us, because the statistics show that we handle a lot of things either internally or we don't talk to people, right? And so we would like to see more of us going to.
I like to think that's changing. I really, sorry to cut off, but
I think
really
it's for a different generation, though.
I think it also depends on what type of statistic that you're looking at, because in many mental health symptoms, African Americans are overrepresented. It's a matter of how well the services are delivered and rendered in those settings so that the outcomes remain robust, healthy outcomes. And so it's not so much that we don't go to therapy. It's not so much that we don't believe in mental health. We do. We actually do. It's about the biases that are there. True. And that's another reason why I was saying it's really important when we keep things in context that we really consider the differences within a community, and we're able to connect with the person that's sitting across from us for what they need and how we can deliver that in the most respectful and humble way. And that when we have conversations like this, it would be wonderful. And this is just my personal opinion, and I'll share it. Hopefully it helps someone to think.
Absolutely.
It would be really great for me if we stopped leading with, because Black folk don't. If we stopped leading with that and we started actually looking at the solutions, finding where they are and holding those out as the standard. And it does happen.
I would agree with that. And I'm only stating, I have to pull my data. So I'm gonna pull my data. She knows. So it says only 1 in 3 Black Americans struggling with mental health issues will ever receive appropriate treatment. So,
appropriate treatment, but it's not for the lack of us reaching out. We do a better job of taking care of ourselves than we get credit for. We do a better job of attempting to care for ourselves than we get credit for. It's just that sometimes when we engage certain systems, we are treated poorly. And that's the big difference. When you read that statistic, that's true of the entire community as well.
That's true.
People don't reach out for mental wellness support. As I mentioned to you, I started in anti-stigma work, and every community that I sat with said, Stigma is greatest in our community. We don't reach out. Every community said that. Now, how can every community believe that it's greatest in their community unless it was just a problem across the board?
This is the truth. I have one more. The anti-stigma statement. What does anti-stigma education actually look like in practice?
Yeah, great question. So it looks like, and I'll just say a statement that I repeat often. Oftentimes, there can be times when I am in a position where I am looking at a person's symptoms and they meet criteria for a specific diagnosis that has a reputation in society, in community, and individually. So stigma is really, again, we got to go back to definitions, right? What is stigma? Stigma is the shame, blame, and guilt inappropriately assigned to individuals based on their condition or their state, the things that they cannot control and didn't necessarily ask for. I never known anyone to ask for a mental health diagnosis. I just have it. Maybe there's someone, right? And so it is often informed by society. What does the world say about this? And we see that in the media, all of that, right? News, all of that, right? Then what does my community say? Bringing it closer to home. What do my peers, my family, what do they say? What do I say about other people when they are living with this particular condition that may be informed by society, it may be informed by family and friends, it may just be even something that I came up with on my own. But what do I say about others when it's not me? How do I feel about individuals? And then do I feel like, because a very close cousin of stigma is discrimination, do I then exclude people based on whatever that condition is, whatever that label is? Dave Chappelle said it really well, and I'm paraphrasing, but he ultimately said, when we put labels on people, we ultimately are really saying that we are too lazy to try to figure out what is going on with them. And it's just easier to put them in a box over there. So what do I say about people? And then what does the individual, whether that's me or someone else, based on all of those other layers of stigma and how it presents itself, blame, shame, and guilt that is inappropriate, how do I then see myself when I am living with a mental health condition, specifically when we're talking about mental health, right? Dr. Kira Banks has this term that she's coined when you talk about racism, for instance. She says it's appropriated racism, where we take all of these ideas that have come from the outside and we appropriate them and accept them ourselves. And stigma could be that way. We talk about internalized stigma. So then what do I say? That becomes the barrier to how I reach out, right? So what anti-stigma does is it puts a face, specifically in this context, to mental health. What is mental health? I said this before, and I didn't really expound on it, what mental health is and what it is not. What it is not is it's not a character flaw. It's not emotional frailty. It's not sin. This person is just sin, and they're in this spiritual battle. Can there be aspects of the conflict that become spiritual for people? Absolutely. But is it in and of itself a result of some sort of spiritual battle or flaw of my own? That's what mental health is not. Right? But what is, it is a diagnosable medical condition, and it is absolutely treatable, just like any other medical condition. When we talk about mental health as anything other than that, we're on a slippery slope to stigma. We're on a slippery slope to creating barriers for health and wellness, and what that can look like in the course of therapy. If you come in with all of that stigma, shame, blame, and guilt, and now I have to deliver to you that yes, what you're dealing with from a medical perspective, your symptoms meet this criteria. First thing that I say to people, that is something to be treated, not judged or condemned. You, every individual, because you are a human being, because you may be listening to the sound of my voice, because your heart is beating, because you are breathing, because you have blood coursing through your veins, you absolutely, one thing I know for sure is you deserve health and wellness. You deserve it. It is your right as a human. When that is judged, that is a violation of your rights. So stigma encourages people, especially in the way that I approach it, stigma encourages people to use whatever microphone they're holding. I call it the power microphone, right? That's because, and I say that because Dr. Barbara Williams always says, you're the sphere of influence in your world. As the sphere of influence in my world, the people that I reach, I have power when I am speaking out. And so whenever I speak about mental health, I want to speak about it from an educational and a compassionate place and space, not one that has mean-spirited jokes, labels that place these inappropriate labels on people, place them in a box and justify their mistreatment and their exclusion from society. That's my anti-stigma work.
One thing I wanted to say, I don't know if it's camping onto what you're saying, but kind of going back when we're talking about social media in a sense, I think they've not so much mainstream, but they didn't make talking about therapy or going to a therapist so taboo. You can pick and choose just how, depending on the subject matter, but just generally speaking, somebody saying, oh, I have a therapist appointment. Oh, okay. Whereas before it's, what, are you crazy? I mean, literally. Yeah.
Right.
That word. So, that's the word Dave Chappelle was actually talking about. I'm glad you said that. I don't even use it anymore because people, this is just my, and I'm not trying to talk anybody in or out of their own definition or into mine, but people are never crazy. Situations are. And perhaps there are situations that have put them in a position that it is so incredibly stressful and in a toxic way characteristics then start to look divergent from what they would normally be had the situation been
Yeah.
healthier.
But I think that also is what helps people feel more comfortable, those
Absolutely.
that would not seek out professional help of any kind because it is mainstream. And then you have,
Yes.
there's one person I follow on YouTube, and she talks about BetterHelp, for example, as far as her going to see somebody. And it just, again, with the influencers and then the fact that it's mainstream now, it really, I think it, and that's in that vernacular, it's helping people to where they're like,
Yes,
oh,
it is.
okay, I can do it. And if they don't want to necessarily come in to see you face to face, there's all these other options, whether it be on the phone, through Zoom, but there's
Yes.
all kind of things, like you said, to meet you where you are. So
Yes.
I think that really helps a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a controversial question and then we're going to
Uh-oh.
move on.
Okay.
What do you think about people who utilize AI as therapy?
Listen, I am all about if it works for you, it works for you. And only you can determine that. So everybody has a right to engage in their health and well-being as they see fit. What I can tell you is that I'm not going to pretend to know everything there is to know about AI. Am I familiar with the conversation? Absolutely. What I can tell you though is that as one who has spent an enormous amount of time and money learning about different therapeutic modalities and has the ability to pivot and adjust when needed, I am curious about how AI can do that. There is a human aspect to therapy that I'm not convinced can be duplicated. And so I hope that answers your question.
I always like to throw AI in here since that's such a buzzword these days.
Mhm.
And there's a lot. It can do pretty much anything.
And I believe that there could be some value in some
Mhm.
aspects, but in terms of replacement, I don't see that as reasonable. I don't see it as realistic. I don't see it as helpful as a replacement to human interaction.
Gotcha. And you made it as a replacement, but maybe as a addition
Perhaps
to
as an additional tool, perhaps. Yeah. But I'm
that.
biased, and I don't mind saying that I'm biased. I'm biased for a very
Yeah.
distinct reason. Yeah.
Just look, I went to school for a lot of years.
Not
Got
only
my
that, but I'm
degree.
going to put this out there. I have experienced what I have experienced being in receiving therapy. What I've experienced from my therapist, it's irreplaceable. I'm
Well,
sorry.
missing the human element also when you're doing that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Again, yeah, you got to be able to pivot and adjust. There's something that happens between, it's called intrapsychic connection, right? There's something that happens between two individuals when you can look a person eye to eye. You can tell different shifts in position. You can tell different tone. You can see shifts in energy. And part of what helps therapy, if we put therapy in there's a lot of research and study about this around common factors is what it's called. It's an approach that there are just common factors that make therapy effective. And one of the biggest parts of that is rapport. It is the connection. And so connection with AI is, don't know how that works. Yeah.
Okay. I like that. Casey, do you have anything else?
no, I don't. I just found it fascinating, just the approach or the response to AI. Because like you said, AI is everywhere. And we've had conversations. If I want to send a decent email, I'm like, zhuzh it up for me, smooth it over or something.
Okay.
So when you start becoming more reliant on it, it just kind of bleeds into that. So getting your perspective is very interesting.
It is. And I think it's more accessible. It's more cost efficient for some who may not know of pro bono or any other means. So that's why I always bring it into the conversation.
It's a very good question. And it begs the question about what are we doing to make health care affordable
Yeah,
for
well,
and accessible for
yeah,
people. So that's probably a whole nother podcast.
it's on the
Well,
list.
that's
Then
a
sometimes
whole
even
other
when
subject.
you're doing AI, sometimes you're getting the answer that you want sometimes. Again, where I'm saying where the human element is not involved in it, like Dr. Monique had said, she could look at your eyes, she could see the body language. They're avoiding the question, they're deflecting this and that. Whereas you're typing in certain things to get the response that you want. Not saying that's wrong, because if I'm looking how to match 3 or 4 colors in a wardrobe, I'm gonna keep going and going and going until you say what I like. I'm guilty of that. That's why I speak of that, because I do that.
That's a great analogy. Great analogy.
You know, I'm an analogy.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are. Let's talk about marriage. Keeping marriage strong. And on this panel, we have a total of 80 years
Oh my
combined.
God.
Yeah.
Wow.
We got 30 years, and I'm just a measly old 20.
Oh, measly. Come on.
Yeah,
I'm almost
okay.
30 years. Almost 30 years. But
Hey,
yes.
I'm a round up.
Okay, there you go.
We're gonna
Yeah, I don't
round
get
it up.
extra points for dating time and stuff like that, just FYI. But yeah, I hear you.
Oh, I'm getting it all. Adding
Okay.
everything in.
She's like, I'm adding it up.
What day did you say I do? What was that day? We start from that day. I'm joking. Kind of.
Well, see, here's the thing. I already knew I was jumping the broom with that one. So it was already a
Oh,
done deal.
I heard
She's
that.
like, I already knew.
I
Think
know
about when I
that.
ask somebody, I'm like, how long have you been married? And they're like 20 years. And I find out that they actually met 20 years ago, but they really only been married for 8 months.
Oh,
Gotcha,
yeah, no,
gotcha.
no.
Well, if we add it when I met,
Yeah,
yeah, it's more.
Yeah, people like the extra credit. I get it.
Yeah,
It's all
yes.
good.
When we talk about marriage, what would you say is the biggest lie that most people believe about long-term marriage? What's the biggest lie? Yeah, like versus actual versus what it takes versus actually reality.
Yeah.
What's the biggest
You
lie
named it
about
right. The
longs?
biggest lie that people tell themselves about long-term marriage is that they're ready.
Mm.
That's the biggest
Woo.
lie.
You don't know what you're getting yourself into.
You really don't. And listen, I say that as one who is listen, I'm so married, my marriage is married. I'm good. Okay.
Okay, she got Mr. Wonderful, y'all. Mr. Wonderful.
And I spell it the way that I spell it. O-N is the only one. Because if the aliens come and get him, the Lord called him home before me, there will not be another.
Oh, man.
Okay.
I say I'm not getting married again. I say that all the time.
Now,
Not that I don't love my husband.
That's right.
Right.
I'm not saying
right.
that.
There is an old joke about a woman who had been married to her husband for decades and decades, and he unfortunately passed away, and she's sitting with her family, and someone says, oh, grandma, well, what are we going to do? We got to get you another husband. And she said, oh, no, you're not signing me up for another one of those. And hear me, this is not a husband bashing. I promise you, it is not. My husband is absolutely wonderful. And marriage is absolutely wonderful. But as my grandmother would say, it is more than an ocean. And so a lot of times people will I think one of the most profound questions I had ever been asked before, and I got married, my husband's name is Troy. One of the things, there was 2 questions that I was asked that they were incredible. Why did I want to be married? And why did I want to be married to Troy? Having to answer those questions and really be reflective about my answer gave me pause. Okay, do I know what I'm doing? And yeah, can I stick this out? Now, for me, the answer was a resounding yes. But I think one of the issues that happen, and I meet with a lot of couples, I've met with lots of couples over the years, and many of them have been even before they got married. And so one of the lies that they will tell themselves is, I'm ready. And then we start talking, and they'll still say, I'm ready. I'm committed. I'm in. And what they really mean is the deposit on the venue has already been put down, and it's
Right.
not.
We
We
just
already
gonna
have
do
the
this.
colors picked out. And so they really are committed to the day and not the life after it. You have to be committed to the life after it. And you have to make that commitment every day and sometimes multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that statement because when I got married, I didn't even go that far into the thinking process. When I met my husband, I just knew he was the one in actuality, to be honest, but I didn't think about how long we would be married. I was always like, if we made it to 5 years, then we doing good. We doing good. Okay? If we get 5 good years out of this, we doing good. Okay. But when we got married, the first 2 years were brutal, meaning we were a blended family. And so there were some differences of rearing of household and children.
True.
And so we really had to get to the point of the cohabitation, the understanding each other's different styles, because we didn't take that into account. And so I really kind of like with Casey when she talked about you being in your class with you and your hubby. We did the same thing there, but we had the Bernards. So we went through the class with the Bernards. And that in actuality helped us a lot because we were like, oh, we're not the only ones that's cuckoo around here. Some of them a little bit more cuckoo than that. Some of them got more
Damn.
Okay. We were like, dang, we ain't that bad. I'm thinking when you're in it, sometimes you're thinking you're the only person that's going through it. Don't nobody dealing with what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But when we got into the class and we got to reading the different books, watching the different videos, and then having just the round tables and just discussing marriage. And we were like, well, shoot, we can work through this. We can get through this. And so it was just more for us, we really learned how to communicate and disagree or be disagreeable, but not, we can agree to disagree. And I'm not going to treat you different. I'm not going to not cook for you. I'm not going to not sleep in the bed with you. I'm not going to not love you. We just had a disagreement. And can we survive it? Yes. Are we going to agree all the time? No. And that's okay.
Yes.
So once we got to that and understanding each other's styles and just learning how to do life together, it got a lot easier. But those first 2 years, I was like, I don't know what I prayed for. I asked God for all of it. I literally wrote a prayer for us when I first met her. And I was like, baby, they did saying about be careful what you ask for. Yes, for.
Maybe you had a run-on sentence and it just didn't dive correctly. Who knows?
But the 2 years were rough for me. So rough for me may not be rough for other people.
Right.
We made it through. And ever since then, that's my best friend. And that's my hubby. That's my everything. I will say those classes though, definitely, if you're at anybody's church or, they definitely have, especially if I didn't come from a married household. So that was new for me as well. So that dynamic also played a part in it as well.
Yeah.
Like I told you, basic questions in terms of religion. What are you going to raise your children at? Are you going to do that? If not, is there going to be an alternate? What are you going to do? And there was what seems now basic questions were not what we even talked about. All I knew was he was fine, he was mine, and gonna make pretty babies. I'm gonna be honest. And you know what I mean? So and with me, my picker was broken completely. This was a blind date. So I'm like, oh shit, this is for me.
There you go.
One thing I think that works in our relationship, for example, I don't stay mad long. I've tried. That's a trait that I got from my dad. We just don't stay mad long. And Aaron is not one to really argue. So if I get geared up, you just want to argue. And either, you know how a cat will play with the mouse before he's okay, yeah, we got about 5 minutes of this. But if it is something serious, then we will actually sit and talk about it. But like to your point, you said, Aaron's my best friend. When we travel, I had asked him, hey, where do you want to go? I got to think about it. I'm like, fuck it. We're going here. And I just drag him with me. And he has more, he has more fun than I do. One question, I don't know I think it was when your class or somebody brought it up, the basic things that people talk about, okay, when they say sickness and in health, what does that really mean? So what if your spouse gets into an accident? They don't die, but now you're the permanent caregiver because they're either a quadriplegic.
I do ask that question in the premarital counseling session.
Okay, maybe that's, okay, see, maybe that was coming from you.
Things like, I don't want to think about that, or,
you don't.
You ask what's the biggest lie that people tell themselves. It's a lot of lies. Let me just say that. And lie probably is, listen, I grew up in a time where you didn't say lie, you had to say, because lie is a pretty strong word. Yeah, you had to tell stories, something like that. So yes, a way about saying lie, because again, some of it is not, listen, it's not intentional, it's not ill-intended at all, and it's not nefarious. But some people before they get married can find themselves entrapped by certain sensibilities that don't serve them well in a marriage. The readiness piece is a part of it, but part of that comes from the fact that people believe love is enough. I love this person, so we're going to be okay. And in the habit of delivering some news. I don't like to use the word good or bad, but it's just news. There are going to be times where love will actually be the thing that will make you stay. There are going to be a lot of other times, though, that love is just simply not enough. You need to have a plan. You need to have a goal. You need to know how to accommodate and negotiate, right? You need to know how to honor the space between where I end and you begin. This whole my person completes me nonsense.
Oh, no.
It goes back to what we were talking about before. Being healthy and whole is your responsibility. Your responsibility to be healthy individually, to be fulfilled individually, and to be balanced and content. You can't come in. I always know who's going to fire me as the therapist when a couple or a family comes to me. It's usually the person that reaches out. Not all the time, but it's usually the person that reaches out. And it's because they come to me in the position, fix them, and everything will be okay. Yeah. And then I have to deliver the unfortunate news. That's not therapy. That's not how this works. And it's not how it's going to work.
Yes. And I think a lot of times people think, oh, marriage is 50-50, and it's not.
Never.
Sometimes you get the 50-50, but as you know, it can be 80-20, 70-30.
And I'm going to say this, it's about 100-100. But here's the thing. What is my 100 today might not be my 100 tomorrow.
Exactly. Absolutely.
But if I'm looking to give 20 because I don't feel like I have 100 to give, then that's what I shoot for. Do you see the difference? If I'm just giving my 100, whatever that is in that moment, all I can ask of myself, that's all my spouse can ask of me. And when that changes, we like conditions, we like neat little boxes, and marriage is not neat.
No.
And it is not one way. So what works for one couple, that same thing doesn't work for the other couple. You have to be the best spouse to the one you have. And a lot of times in church, folk don't like that because they like to use scripture to justify the other person making all of the changes and accommodations, and they don't have to do anything. That's the responsibility piece.
But even in marriage, people, I can tell you, I'm not the same person I was day one when we got married or even started dating than I am today. So we both have changed and we've grown together. And when I say also grown apart, I don't mean it in a bad way. We've grown and we've developed ourselves individually,
Mhm.
but then collectively, we're still good.
Right.
And I know sometimes people will say marriage is hard. Yes, we've dealt with some hard and harsh things for sure. But because Erin is my friend, I don't, when I say marriage isn't hard, I'm talking more or less about the relationship and I have. And I know when they say that finances can definitely be one of the main things to kind of put you on the rocks. I'm not going to say necessarily break you up, but put you on the rocks. And we've had some financial issues years ago. And it's because the love and the respect that we had for each other, because it could have gone, I could have been knocking on Dr. Monique's doors. I'm like, I need somewhere to stay. She'd be like, you ain't staying here. But seriously, because of our relationship, we were able to weather that storm. So for me, marriage is not hard because of who my partner is. And again, but we've had some harsh things, whether it be family, finances, whatever, that's going to happen. But I got my sidekick over here. So it
Yeah.
makes it not hard.
Yeah, but for a lot of people, marriage is hard, and
Right.
for the very distinct reason that you just acknowledged. I don't know if you're brilliant on accident or on purpose, but it works.
You
Because
can take it any way I can get it.
yeah, I'm telling you,
Okay.
that was brilliant. I'm gonna tell you, because what ends up happening a lot of times in marriage is that people will take the hard things and they don't know the difference between what happened to a person, what happened to one of us, what's happening to one of us, because they confuse that and think that it's happening because of one of us, right? And they don't separate injury to self or other from injury to relationship.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I will say to couples is, what does the relationship need? And they say, huh? Yeah. What does the relationship need? I need.
Oh.
So now we have to, again, it goes back to words. So now we have to go back again. We have to define some things. What is a need? What is a want? And whose responsibility is that to fulfill that? Because if I came in thinking that I'm going to get married to have all of my needs and desires fulfilled by another person, you set yourself up for what is going to be a very hard marriage.
Yep.
And I get
And
that
that's not
all
fair
the
to the
time.
other person. That's not fair to them
But
either.
we're supposed to please each other.
Right.
Where that
Do
Right.
Sorry.
you think that's why there's a
It
lot of
wasn't doctor talk, was it?
No, she
No,
said
but
that was a
it's
doctor. You what?
So
It's an interesting conversation to say you did some research, the sexual health of Black women.
I do.
Okay.
And part of it has, it really honestly, it's connected to what we were just talking about with couples. So a lot of times with couples, you definitely see a part of their families coming in. And I'm really intentional about, as much as I can, gathering information and creating a safe space for people to open up and be their authentic selves. Unapologetic, I want them to be their unapologetic, authentic selves when we're talking about therapy. Part of that is because I recognize that all of us sitting here are sitting here with, it's not just us. I'm sitting here with you. My grandmother is sitting here. My grandfather is sitting here. Some aspects of my parents are sitting here. My cousins, the aunties that I call great, the aunties greater than I, my aunties are sitting here. I realize that a lot of my upbringing, my biases, it's all here. If I don't invite that into the room, then we're going to be hard pressed to really get some movement. So it's come on in, sit down and be comfortable, but leave your arms outside. We ain't leaving no arms outside. Bring it in. If it's there, it comes up and it comes out. If it comes up and it comes out, we deal with it, right? But it's welcome there. And so what I have found, there were two things that I found that were really kept coming up over again. They were kind of thematic when I was meeting with couples and families, specifically couples, but this also showed up in families and individuals as well. And that was that there were unaddressed or inappropriately addressed mental health challenges if we were meeting in a counseling perspective, like if we were meeting at the church, when we were leaders in the church. But then even also as a therapist, that was that piece that we talked about before, where it was community stigma, historical and pervasive racism, sexism, weightism, lookism, all of the is that would show up, right? That informed how people viewed themselves and others, and how they navigated relational interactions. So that was part of it. The other part of it that really came up when in relationship with spouses and with children was this aspect of sexual health. And a lot of it came from, again, narrow definitions, that sexual health is the absence of STIs or reproductive struggles. What the sexual health definition really didn't talk about when I was growing up were about any positive aspects of sex. When you talk about that from a female perspective, we grow up in a culture where abstinence only until marriage sex education is a standard. No, stop, don't until you get married. And so it does a couple of things. This is very connected to the whole conversation that we've been having. It does a couple of things. One, it assumes that marriage is the pursuit and a destination that everyone wants or needs to have. That's problematic because that is a swoop generalization that leaves out a lot of people. And when I say a lot of people, I'm talking about people who do not desire to be married for whatever the reason. And I'm also talking about people who do not identify heterosexually.
Okay.
So abstinence only until marriage, sex education, it's a lot of research that shows that a lot of the messages are heterosexist. They assume that being heterosexual is, they're heteronormative, in other words, and that is the gold standard. The other part of that is that it leaves out the aspect of pleasure. That there are good things. I don't know if you all remember this, but Salt and Pepper used to have a song. Let's talk about sex. Yeah, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
You know, we know that song. That's our age group.
I'm a Salt and Pepper fan, right? And it says, let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. I was in high school when that song came out. I had been exposed to sex education in the schools since probably about the 6th grade or so, because it started with puberty, right? That was their idea of sex education. All through middle school, which was more so about not only menstruation and reproduction, but that was the idea about sex education. And it also started to touch on sexually transmitted infections and contraception. And so from the 6th grade to high school, I think I was probably in the 10th or 11th grade when that song came out. That was the first time I had ever heard the words sex and good in the same sentence.
Yeah.
Since then, I continued as an individual to be inundated with information about quote unquote sexual health and sex education. Right. Sex education, but I've been inundated with information until I started my research. I was always interested in this area because it came with a very simple question. Why is it that as a Black Christian woman, this was my question to me, why is it as a Black Christian woman, I am expected to be married and have children with no conversation about sex other than don't do it? I didn't understand that. So when I get married, a light is supposed to flick on and I'm supposed to know everything there is to know about sex, because here's the deal, there were still no conversations about sex for married folk, no conversations. Particularly though, what I was learning is that there were conversations that were being had about sex. They weren't being had about sex with women in any other way than to shame, blame, and guilt them. So that started with textbooks. My research shows this. Textbooks, when you do a look at textbooks, all of the language about sex is geared toward females starting in middle school, and it is shame-based and it uses fear-based language to discourage them from having sex. Anything that is directed toward males encourages them to use contraception. So my next question is, then who are the males supposed to be having sex with if the girls are not supposed to be having sex with them? What are they using contraception for? So of course, like most teenagers, I turned to the media. And what I would hear were layers of messages that were around respectability politics for women. You got to dress a certain way, you have to look a certain way if you're not considered respectable. That was also layered with systemic, historical, and pervasive racism toward Black women. So you are either portrayed as the mammy, where you are asexual, no sexual needs or desires of any kind, or you are the Jezebel, where you are complicit in your consumption and anything that is negative around your sexuality, that where you are viewed as a threat to other women. And so this was very confusing to me. What does all of this mean? And how do I go from no, stop, don't to yes, husband, this is wonderful. So I started asking the question, what would my life have been like if I had grown up without guilt, fear, or shame around sex? Which, by the way, is a human, natural, wonderful thing to participate in. It is a part of the human experience. Now, do I identify that there are some people who identify as asexual? I don't have sexual desire. Okay. For others, though, it is a part of development and it is a part of connection. And when we only look at it through the lens of what negatively can happen, and that's how we teach it, it leaves women with this really odd space to go, because then that means, wait, it never talks about mutuality, never talks about sexual health, including mutuality, pleasure, or freedom. How was that showing up for me? It was showing up with the majority of couples coming to see me with major issues around sexual dysfunction, because the information that was given, not just at the school, but that was repeated at home, and that was repeated in the church. Holiness or hell. And that was directed at women. You're going to cause young boys to stumble. My responsibility for their behavior and my behavior. So what was happening was that I was finding that there was a large number of women who were not feeling, they did not have a sense of sexual health because all of their information had been coming from a negative place. Now, I want to be really clear because this starts in adolescence. The body is made to develop. Development includes sexual development, right? So my work really wasn't so much about encouraging young people to have sex. I want to be really clear about that. That is not what my research is about. What my research is about being able to teach aspects of sex in a comprehensive way so that when young people, and when, because they do have sex, research shows that abstinent only until marriage sex education does not yield the results that it was meant to yield. Young people are still having, and especially young Black girls are having their sexual debut. And I'm going to say it that way because the old way, you know how it talks about it from a loss, loses her virginity. She loses her innocence rather than she debuts her sexuality in a way that is healthy and comprehensive. And it includes her ability to negotiate her body and not just have her body consumed. There are a lot of pieces to it, but what we really found was that there were a lot of themes in it as well. Sexual debut still remains early. And in fact, earlier for young Black teens than it does for their non-Black counterparts. Latin and Black women tend to still have an early sexual debut. That is not a judgment or condemnation. It's an observation that research shows. It also shows that those who pledge abstinence until marriage rarely make it to marriage. They still debut sexual earlier. And it does not keep them from avoiding pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections and diseases, but it does not preclude them from that. So in other words, we're still getting pregnant and we're still dealing with infections. That's not just as young people, that's also as emerging adults and middle-aged adults. And what it is also doing, it creates often confusion in the marriage because it really is harder to make that transition from no, stop, don't to pleasure. Most Black women, this is what my research shows, says that when they have sex, and we're talking about peak pleasure, like before even after we deal with the mutuality, like we both want this and I'm doing what I want to do, right? We're talking about even when we get to sex, most women are not even expecting to have an orgasm because they've been taught that sex and pleasure is for men. It's not for us. So the expectation to even enjoy it is not there until we have some awakenings about how to create information for ourselves and others that include some of the positive, like Salt and Pepper said, some of the good things that may be. And when that happens, then we find that sexual debut actually can and really does happen a little bit later.
So you're not just going through the motions, you're being an active participant and recouping the benefits as everyone should. Okay.
We deserve pleasure. Black women deserve pleasure. And we deserve better than the education that we're getting around it.
I didn't even get education in school. I remember in grade school, a notice went out to the parents, and I don't know what the outcome was. Maybe they didn't want the kids to be taught that. Elementary school, 4th and 5th grade. I think mine went up to the 6th grade. So definitely not then. The closest I might have had was in biology class or something like that. But then it's all mechanical. You're talking, that was anatomy class at the same time, a section of the biology class. And I was pretty much left to my own devices.
I have a question, or maybe I wouldn't say a question, but just an observation of what you said. And sex education I did receive, I want to say it was 8th grade. I think it was before we hit high school. It was in middle school from when I went to school. Do I recall what we talked about? No, I do not. But you said debut as it being a positive, right? Am I quoting you correctly?
I just said that sexual debut is a term that is used in literature that I personally have adopted. And basically what it means, I was just kind of clarifying, basically sexual debut means that you're having sex for the first time.
Okay. So having sex for the first time. So that doesn't mean it was consensual. It can be either or. That's still your debut?
Sexual debut, the idea is absolutely for it to be consensual. So when it's not consensual, then that is not a sexual debut. That is actually abuse.
That's because when you said it, I was like, because there's a lot of, and like I said, I have a different podcast and we have these conversations. And when you talk to a lot of young ladies or ladies from vast age groups, they've usually not experienced a debut, but they've experienced some type of abuse or trauma. And that's what leads to a lot of their notions about sex, their rigidity about sex. They're not wanting to have sex, or even with their partner, or even their husband, they have a problem with it. So it's not really, I haven't encountered anybody who said it was a debut. It's usually a trauma.
Let me also say this, that Abstinence-only until marriage sex education in a lot of its forms preserve rape culture, because it does make some assumptions about sexual violence that if a lot of young women have acknowledged, made them feel responsible for what was happening between them and the other person, even when it's not what they desired or wanted. So body autonomy being missing from that conversation. Let me just say this, the bulk of my research was on how it impacted women, but also of note is how it impacted men, because young men are in these conversations as well. And what my research did discover is that most men, some of the available literature out there when I was doing the research said that a lot of young men, adolescents and young men, they check out of those type of sex education presentations because they do not believe that it is for them, because the information is so directed and geared toward women, what to do to stay safe, how to stay safe, which is, to your point, how effective is it when we have so many women who can identify with an experience versus a debut. But the idea is that they would have a debut.
Ideally, absolutely. I don't have any more questions on that one.
I go real long on that one. My bad. I was trying to make that one short.
No, it's very interesting. It really was.
That's my space. I will just also say this really quick. A lot of the toxic communication, and I am going to use the word toxic because it becomes hard in the end. A lot of the toxic information that young women get, and I interviewed women through my research, but I also what we call triangulated research through available literature. In my own interviews, as well as the countless interviews that I read, a lot of the toxic information that women get about sex comes from other women.
Yep, absolutely. They trauma bond. That's what I call it.
They bond over the trauma. Trauma bond is, that's another one of those phrases that get thrown out there. Trauma bond is actually by definition, clinically, something totally different than the way people use it. But yes, they bond over the trauma. But more importantly, what I'm saying is that it's not because they're bonding. In other words, bonding would mean, if we bond over the trauma, that means that mom would be telling you about her trauma and you all are bonding over that. Right?
True.
But what is happening actually is that mom is placing shame, blame, and guilt on young girl for the way her body is developing, what she looks like, and accusing her of being fast or aligning with these other labels like the Jezebel, the Sapphire, those sort of things that we navigated and fought to get through historically between communities, but then folded in, right, to continue to perpetuate it in our families and in our homes. Not a judgment, not a condemnation, just a...
And that's true. And I just, when you said that, you triggered something in my memory with regards to my mother and my grandmother. And they never, if they did talk about encounters with men, and this is after I got older, after I've had the sexual experience, but I guess they felt more comfortable with talking to me at that point and not as a person that they should have been talking to, a young girl. I digress, but it was negative. It wasn't a positive experience. They always talked about the negative experience of it, which now that I'm thinking about it, it is interesting. It was never it's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It was always a negative.
Say that we're a Jezebel, but that's a bad thing in a lot of ways. And listen, messages can be implicit and they can be explicit. And all respect to your mom and grandma and all moms and grandmas, because again, I do not acknowledge this truth as something to be necessarily judged or condemned. I really truly believe it had value. It was a protective thing, right? Some of it was we just didn't know. But that's why the research for me. Some of it, now listen, there probably are some instances in which it was just better for a mother or two to keep their mouth closed. Let me just say that. Maybe it was intentional, like we are not going to have this conversation, but part of it was the shame around it. Now, what I will say is that you mentioned the word trauma bond. I just got to get this out here for free because it's just nothing you said, nothing you did, but it's one of those, the Google nets. The Google nets constantly, the Google nets, InterTube, Twitterverse, you see my social media games, we kind of stuff. Often using that term, oh, it was a trauma bond. That is not trauma bond. Trauma bond is when two people are in a relationship and they are behaving in ways that keep the trauma and the toxicity in the relationship going. That's what a trauma bond is. In other words, I do something so that the person that I'm abusing will pursue me. And then so I ice them out. I'm just giving you an example. I ice them out because I want to control their behavior. So then what they do is that they now become over accommodating for me, right? And so then it reinforces the trauma that I inflict on them. That's a trauma bond. When I behave in ways that encourage my abuser to continue to traumatize me. But to your point, people do bond, they connect, over trauma. They have that are similar, but that's not a trauma bond. And that my research shows that what was also really empowering the shame, blame, and guilt that a lot of young girls felt was the silence. That we just don't say anything. I will never forget when my daughter was about 6 or 7. We were in Los Angeles, California for some conference or something. They came out to see me. And I was sitting with her and I said, hey, what do you know about sex? And she said, I know it's disgusting. And oh my goodness, I can laugh about it now. But I promise you, I was heartbroken. I was devastated. Because I knew that I nor her father had ever told her that. We had never told her that. So where did you get that from? But my point of telling that story was I realized in that moment, okay, clearly we have been silent in an area where we need to be speaking up because people are already talking to her.
Do you think that because you were living out your marriage in front of her, that it was an assumption?
That she would just somehow get a message that this was a beautiful thing.
Is that why you guys never talked about it with her? And then when she said what she said, you were like, oh my God, we didn't.
I think we were a little bit unique in the fact that these were conversations that we were having with each other and we were intending to have. I think we were naive in that moment to assume that it wasn't time yet. I remember one time going to a conference and one of the speakers said, whatever age your children are now, you should have been talking to sex with them 2 years ago. And I thought, oh, so that's part of what prompted me to ask the question. Plus I knew when I said that thing earlier about your parent out of spite or out of guilt or out of habit, I'm one of those who are parent out of spite. Sorry, mommy, but I do. There were just things that my mother didn't say or did say in a certain way that I took a certain way. That I was just like, I'm not gonna do that with my daughter. Now, the good news is we have all grown. We have all been able to circle back to conversations. This is why I say it's never, ever too late to confront or resolve an issue. It's never too late. It really isn't. Maybe if you no longer
Okay, there are circumstances.
but alive. You're alive.
That's the caveat, but that's okay.
Yeah, you can have a conversation, but you have to be able to own what it is you're saying. And that perhaps, and I always say you have to have a goal of the conversation when you enter into it, because you might get an answer for something or you might get a response to something that might throw you off your game a little bit. Think it through, plan it out, because it's just one of those things. I think my mom did think that I could and would talk to her about anything. That wasn't true for me. I wanted my daughter really, truly, my daughter and my sons, don't get me wrong. I wanted my children to be able truly to talk to me. You can ask me anything and you can tell me and we'll work it out. We'll be, hey, I won't be angry. I might have some feelings about it. Let me not lie. I might have some feelings about it, but we're going to work together.
Right.
I was just glad that she was honest with me and she didn't say nothing. I'm glad she gave me her authentic answer. And so I asked her, all my children, I ask them questions now that most parents and children would blush at, but we have the conversation.
You have the conversation.
We do. No, I'm listening. I'm not a bully. If they don't want to have a conversation with me, we don't. But they're all grown now. And now the oldest one is married, so I don't want to know their business, although they probably won't tell me. But yeah, it is what it is.
I love it. I love it. No, this was good because it actually just brought up some old memories that I guess you don't think about it.
No, you don't
think about
you
it.
don't.
And I think I parent like you because I didn't get those type of conversations from my mother because she was a young mother. She was a teenage mom. So I think she was trying to protect me. She's definitely trying to guard me. The way she parented me was very strict. And I know it's because she was a young mom. She didn't want to. And she was very but she also, to your point, what you were talking about, how the mothers treat the young girls, their daughters different from the boys.
Society.
It just prompted it because the way and I'm the oldest out of my brothers, but it was very strict with me, but my brothers, it was not. And they were younger than me. So it's just I'm thinking about it as you're saying, and I was like, okay, then that makes sense. It makes sense now.
I'm glad you said that. And I really am, because my mother was, look, my mama don't do the internet webs either. So if anybody tell her, they're gonna have to show it to her because I'll deny it. But my mom was a teenage mom too. She was a teenage mom, and nonetheless in the 60s. And so I have really learned to come to terms with the fact that my mother was working against a lot. There were a lot of pressures for her to ensure that her daughter didn't repeat the pattern, because then that would besmirch her parenting, right? Yeah, she treated me very differently in that aspect than she did her sons. I heard my mom give my brothers the sex talk with something like this. Look, it's some stuff out there that could kill you now. Take these condoms and use them.
Wow.
For me, I was not allowed to date.
Nope.
It was just a huge difference. Now I did date.
Yep.
But I would have loved to have had my family much more a part of that. By the time I did have a first boyfriend, we were such a good group that I don't know my mother really realized that he was my for real boyfriend. She certainly didn't meet my husband until we were pregnant. I don't mind saying that.
Right.
My oldest son was born a year before we got married. And so my mother came when I was pregnant, because there was an openness to meet someone that I was dating, because it opened up a door she wasn't ready to open. She did the best she could with what she had and what she was working against. And I don't blame her for that. I forgive her for that, but I do carry out spite because of that. And I don't listen, people with the word spite and they go, but I'm serious. I made a choice to do it different.
Right. I totally get what you're saying, because I did the same thing. And like you said, I don't blame her. I forgave her for that, but it took some years. So
I'm you bringing it full circle. I to look without her permission or her participation.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
And we still absolutely. I'll call her later today.
Well, hey, like I said, my daughter came to my wedding.
She's in the pictures.
So yeah, she was there. She had a little dress.
Okay.
So, but then on top of that, though, because we were expecting, that's not why Aaron's like, nope, we're not getting married just because she's expecting. Because my family was like, my grandmother was like, "Are you guys going to get married before she arrives?" And he's like, "We ain't doing a shotgun wedding. No,
Mm-mm.
not doing that."
Same. Troy asked, and I was like, nah, I need to know that you want to marry me.
Hmm.
And when we're clear that you want to marry me, really, when I was a little feisty, but I was like, when I can feel content. But see, again, the reason why that was the case for me is because I was inundated with all of these messages about how I wasn't respectable because I didn't got pregnant. You see what I'm saying? You see how that informed
Yeah,
all of the shame, blame, and guilt that
for
we're in?
sure. Because
Yeah.
my grandmother, she's been gone for a while, but like I always tell Eve, if I talk about her in too long of a spurt, it just kind of makes me want to cry for grandma. But believe it or not, she was more upset and mad the most when I told her that we
Mm.
were expecting. Years later, come to find out, she had my mom. She wasn't married.
So she had higher
So
expectations for you.
yeah, so then it kind of made sense because my mom got married at 18 and then had me at 20. So she kind of escaped, if you will, that part of it. But my grandmother was from the South. She was going to Florida A&M at the time. My grandfather was in the military, and I guess he happened to happen onto the campus for what? I don't know. There's no degree in his lineage with
For your
that.
grandmama.
Glad he
So
did. You wouldn't be here.
knock on wood. But then, like I said, she was a teacher, and he was in the military. He moved out here. So if I did the math and really got to thinking, my mom was 13 when they moved out to from Florida to California. My grandfather was already living here. So I wear her wedding rings now, but to my understanding, she wasn't married. And then here I come.
They don't
They're
want for you what they experienced. It just
right.
don't know how to translate that into language that is empowering. So
Right. And I don't know if you see on social media or Instagram or what have you, but when they say how Black families, when they apologize after you get in trouble, I'm going, so you want something to eat? So that was her way after a while of saying, I apologize. So I knew what it was. And that I forgave. You happy?
sometimes we have to have grace. Love it.
She's like, I forgave and I forget.
Yeah.
Forgave.
I let it go and I moved on. But it makes sense when you kind of know, like I said, the backstory, the full circle of everything. And like I said, I had a white dress, and I wasn't walking down the aisle with my gut out with a white dress, but I still wanted the white dress. Yeah.
And the important thing is that you're able to develop a family in a healthy way with support around you, regardless to how the family comes to be.
Right.
And a lot of times we confuse support with agreement.
Right.
We confuse respect even with agreement. You don't have to agree
Right.
to be able to respect and to understand that's where you are.
Exactly. Thank you.
Love
And
it.
good night.
All right, this is the last one, you guys. We're going to deal
Oh,
with
I was
this.
just kidding.
We're going to get into faith and therapy working together. I wanted to know from you, there's a point of tension between religion and therapy, or the science of psychology, right? I'm listening to you. Does that work in some denominations in Christianity? A lot of what you learn in psychology is not biblical. How do you balance being a licensed therapist and your spirituality or your Christianity?
That's a really good question. And it's a very interesting way that you posed it. So I'm going to try to answer it. I love humor and sometimes the sarcastic humor. So I want to be very professional when I answer this.
Humor.
So if I'm understanding your question, you're asking me, how do I balance that for myself, or how do I balance that for the people who's come to see me?
For yourself first.
Mhm.
That's
I don't
what
have
I would like. Okay. Okay.
I am who I am. And so when I'm in the therapy room, who you see right now is exactly who. And so in terms of balancing, it's just always there. It's not something that I feel in crisis about at any given time. What I believe as an individual, I haven't ever, and look, I don't know if that's very Christian to do. I just knocked on wood. Would that be considered non-Christian? Answer it this way. I have never had at this point in my life and career, I have not had an experience where my personal belief has been in conflict with what I'm doing.
Okay. So no point dealing with, because you mentioned sexuality, non-heterosexual sexuality, and how it's viewed sometimes in certain settings. So you have never had a conflict.
With clients or patients, no. I've counseled same-sex couples, and they get the same legal and ethical obligations, the same level of commitment and unconditional high regard and respect as anyone else. And not because I'm one of those people where I'm like, okay, I don't see gender, I don't see color. I do. I absolutely do. I see everything that's important to the individual that they need me to see. What is overarching in all of that, or what I bring to that, like I said, is a commitment to help. I got into this field to help people. I am called to this field to help people. And I answered that call knowing full well, this is me. I'm not speaking for anybody else. This is me. I got called to that field, and I didn't say, okay, I'm going to call to only help heterosexual couples. I didn't. And as far as I can understand today, relationships, the conversations, the interactions that I have with them and God, I've never been told to stop.
Okay.
When I'm in that room, I am in that room as their therapist. What they do with who they love, all I'm doing is speaking to the health and well-being of that.
Very good answer.
I mean it. I love people. My obligation is to love people and to serve people. That's biblical. Oh, no man, nothing but to love them. Man meaning human. I love people. I love God, and that means him enough to love his people enough to serve them the way he has called me to do. And that is with integrity, transparency, honesty, and staying in my lane and in my role.
I like that. I like that. Because some people would view that as a point of contention. Some people would, I can't advise someone that I don't religiously, I'll say it that way, disagree with.
I love that you said that. I'm not religious.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a relationship with Christ.
Okay. That's why I made sure I said it that way, because it's a difference.
It is.
It's a difference.
You ever see those commercials when they say Jesus, he gets us? Yeah. That's who I have a relationship with. The one who gets us. I have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And I am called to serve. And in my profession, that means to do no harm. First and foremost. That's what you would call pretty much our Hippocratic oath. Do no harm. I don't go into any room to do any harm. And denying who a person is. I had this wonderful experience. I'll say this really quick. I'm sorry, but you'd be hitting on touch points and then I'd be having to talk. I did this when I was, this goes back to grad school, actually. It was a lecture about working with the LGBTQ plus population. And the facilitator came in and said, I'm gonna break you into pairs and you decide who's gonna go first and do that now. And so we did that. My partner decided that I would go first. And I said, okay, I guess I'll volunteer to go first. She said, now let me give you the instructions. I want you to turn to your partner in this exercise and tell them everything you did this summer. And I said, okay. And she said, hold on though, before you do that, make sure that you don't include the person that is most important to you. And so I said, oh. And so she said, okay, go. I turned to my partner and I said, okay, so this summer I literally burst into tears.
Really?
Yeah. How in the world am I supposed to talk about anything in my life and leave out Mr. Wonderful?
Not Mr. Wonderful. You can't leave him out.
I can't leave him out. So why in the world would I assume, so arrogant, to assume that someone else doesn't have a Mr. Wonderful or Mrs. Wonderful in their life and ask them to leave them out? Rude.
I like that. Message, y'all.
Right.
Message.
I'm called to love. And I'm called to honor spaces where people love. I went on this subject because I get a lot of people who come to me and say, well, you're a Christian, so you do Christian counseling. I do not. Am I opposed to it? No, but let's talk about the definition of that. Just to say, okay, I'm a Christian. I do not. I deal with health and well-being the same way your mechanic works on your engine. I do with the brain. I don't know about you. I don't need my mechanic to be Christian. Okay, let me back up. Let me use something else.
Right, just so happen that he is.
My point is, I have a need. I'm not going to stop the person who devoted their life to the discipline of providing that need and ask them if they're Christian and then tell them that if they're not, they can't provide my need. That's ridiculous. And it's just my profession. I'm called to help people. It doesn't matter what they believe. Because guess what? It doesn't change what I believe. I mind my business. And what other people think, what they believe, even what they believe or think about me, guess what? Even if they're Christian too, that's none of my business, so I stay out of it.
I love that. So health and wellness is universal.
It's a human right. And as long as you're human, that's who I'm trained to deal with. Now, the health and wellness of your pet, I don't do that. I'm going to send you to somebody else. But if you're human, you need some support around your health and well-being, I'm your girl.
Okay. I love that. Last question, and this is how we're going to end it off. What does it mean to disrupt and discuss your own life?
I love that. Okay. I think in today's world, there's a lot that vies for our attention to take us off of our health and wellness game plan, for the lack of a better word, right? There are a lot of things pulling at us that if we let it can overtake us into unwellness. And I also want to be clear that sometimes, many times, that is actually by design. And so one of the things that I do is to disrupt any plan. Interrupt, literally, the definition of the word. Shake up, interrupt. Any plan that is seeking to decrease or even destroy my health and well-being, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. And the way that I disrupt that plan is that I remain responsible for myself and who I bring and how I bring myself to every situation. So that is through self-care. Another buzzword that you hear, but I'm going to say, when I say self-care, what I'm talking about is not aftercare. So it's not after a long day, I go get in the tub. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. I'm talking about the things that I do before, during, and after I have to meet the needs of self first and then others.
Yeah.
And how I show up to those spaces and places. So I know myself pretty well. You can do that when you live more than half a century.
Right.
You get to know
Right.
yourself pretty well,
Yes,
right?
you do.
I know what works for me and I pursue that. What works for me personally are slow starts. I need a slow start to my day. I don't jump out of bed and get ready and out the door. That's not what I do. And sometimes that means allotting a little bit more time before I have to leave so that I have time for reflection. One of the first ways that I reflect is through coffee. Caffeine is magical, specifically in the form of coffee. It is magical and mystical, and it does wonders for me. And one of the things that it also allows me time to reflect, to have gratitude. I am incredibly honored to participate in a world where I get to do what I truly believe I was called and maybe even born to do. My grandfather, Tom Haywood, is one of the most incredible human beings this world has ever seen. And since before I can remember, they would always say, prepare to take your place in society. And I prepare to take my place in society every day through tremendous gratitude for his life and that of my grandmother, Ruby Lee Haywood, powerful, feisty, wonderful, compassionate, and loving, caring matriarch of our family and human being. These two individuals created such an incredible and powerful legacy that I just wake up some days, I can't believe God chose me to be a part of their family. I just feel so incredibly honored. And then I think about the struggles and the things that brought them to where they are and where they were in life. They have since transitioned from this life to the next. And that is okay. They graduated, right? Their work was done. And so they moved on, right? But what they left is so incredible. And so I wake up in the mornings really grateful for that, first and foremost. I'm really grateful for my father, who convinced me from a very early age that he loved me with his entire heart. And when I was convinced, at the point that I was convinced, he had never said the words. Very rarely said the words throughout my life, right? In fact, most of the time he called me girl. It's almost like he didn't know my name. He gave it to me. But I start off with gratitude. I start off with gratitude for being alive. When I wake up in the morning, I know that it was not my alarm that did it. Cliche, but the truth. I know it wasn't my alarm that did it. And I wake up and I realize that I'm still in this body and I'm still on this earth. I can move and I can think and okay, this is all good. Let me go get that coffee so I can reflect and think a little bit more. So I pray. That's how I front load my day. What do I need to pray about? Who do I need to pray for? But it starts absolutely with being absolutely grateful. My husband and I traveled to Louisiana, New Orleans last summer. We went to the Whitney Plantation and we walked around the plantation and I'm going somewhere. I'm about to land this real quick. Sorry, I'm talking so long, but you asked a question.
I'm trapped in. I'm following you.
Okay.
And so I'm in this place and I'm thinking about all of the life lessons of the things that my grandfather would talk about on a Sunday or any day that we were having dinner or after dinner. He would talk about a lot of things. And I got a chance to hear what his life was like with full knowledge of the time frame that he grew up in. And I would think how remarkable it is. And so it would serve as great inspiration for me. I didn't always have it together, but I knew that one day if I ever decided that I could get it together, I would, because my granddad raised 7 amazing children, 7 of the most incredible children. And so I didn't really have to look far in my family for heroes. My aunts, you heard me say this earlier, that I call my aunts the aunties greater than I. They are incredible human beings who have poured so much love into me. And that includes my biological aunts. And I have a few chosen aunts, folk that just came along as well, that whom I just love tremendously and dearly, and they pour into me. So I take the lessons that all of those people poured into me daily. And for those that are still here on earth with us, I make time to spend some time just talking to them, because the things that I am trying to do, they have already done. The things that I need encouragement, the days that I need encouragement to continue to push through, I surround myself by people that are wiser than me and people who know better than me so that I can glean from that. So I make time to get poured into from them. And that might not happen daily, but it does happen regularly. Daily, though. It starts with the gratitude from what has already been poured in. Flexible about that too. So I give myself what I need, give myself rest. I give myself the energy and nutrients that I need. I give myself lots and lots of laughter. And that means even if I have to build it in 5 minutes at a time, I actually live my days at least a good 30 minutes at a time.
That's
that 30 minutes is great. So praise the Lord. What we got to do to get to the next 30 minutes? Because I'm a therapist and my sessions are usually an hour long. But I'm just saying, I build it in. So if I need to take a break between sessions to laugh, I do that. If I need a break between sessions for somebody to say, you're doing okay, you're showing up, it's all right. Back to the Whitney Plantation. I'm listening to the accounts of people who lived before, during my grandmother's time, and some of the things that they experienced where they were. And I was walking there thinking, my God, I am walking in this place the answer to prayers, and in some ways, perhaps even beyond the wildest imagination or dreams of some of the people that I'm listening to their account of what it was like to live on that plantation. I'm listening to their account of what their grandmother told them because she was on that plantation. And I'm thinking about my grandparents' ancestors. I'm thinking about my grandparents and all of the ways that they loved me, all the ways that they're still loving me today. I can still feel and hear my father saying, keep going. I can hear my father saying, you're okay now. Troy, we approve. He got you. Go with him now. And I'm walking here. I got the nerve to think that I could be a doctor. I'm grateful.
Shit, Monique.
I want to be clear because that doctor can sometimes trip people up. Hear what I say. Grateful, not necessarily just great. I am. I'm grateful.
All right.
What I will never do anymore, and I've forgiven myself for this. I will never, ever shrink again to make someone else feel comfortable because my ancestors fought too hard.
Absolutely.
And so did I. And if I shrink today, I give my daughter permission to shrink tomorrow. I stay grateful. I stay humble. I do what I need to do to be healthy, whether that's hanging with my peers, whether that's going on a date with Troy. And I don't wait for him to invite me on the date. Back to marriage, right? Romance goes both ways. I invite him too. I make time to grieve because in those relationships and in those losses are blessings, sorrows because they're gone, but it's a lot of joy. And I don't disrespect them by trying to ignore that or avoid that. I remember. I don't try to forget. I try to remember everything. If you saw me, pictures, my grandfather, my grandmother, you see them around me. My brother, who, when I was a kid, I used to ask you know my brother? Because that was the test to know if I could fool with you or not. If you know him, get on. Right? But I take time to grieve because that's part of my journey.
Right.
And I can't forget. It keeps them alive. It keeps me alive. It keeps me healthy. It keeps me well. And it gives me everything I need to enter into any type of situation. So then I can pull in that situation. I take deep breaths. Hey, this one is tough, but I can get through it because I got through the last one. And then when it's all over, I do that thing, whatever it is, that's going to put back some joy. That's going to put back some peace. And yes, sometimes that actually does include some mind-blowing, mutual, free sex with my husband.
That's right. You guys are empty nesters, right?
We are.
So you can have the door open.
All right.
Yeah. That might be how we became empty nesters in the first place. You got to ask the kids. I'm just saying.
No, I don't want. No, I'm not asking the kids.
I'm joking, but not really. But I'm joking. I love what I do, and I can't be mad at any of the stuff that brought me here. I really can't.
Yeah.
So I remind myself of that. No complaints.
I love that. Casey, do you have anything you want to add?
I can't come behind that.
I know.
Absolutely not. I don't want to start crying.
You're making me come behind that. I'm like,
I mean,
that's a mic drop.
I'm just so glad you're here.
Thank you.
I don't know what the future holds, but I'm speaking maybe for the both of us. You have to come back. There's so many different topics that we haven't unpacked.
Right.
Will definitely.
Each one of these could have been a show in itself. So
I'd love
Monique, thank you so much for coming and discussing your profession from mental health to longevity in marriage to sex health to your faith and therapy. You pretty much broke down the gamut, right? And you did not disappoint. We would love to have you back. Wanted to say thank you to our YouTube family. Thank you to our audio family. Until the next one, what do we like to say, Casey?